active members of the Canadian Armed Forces were just hit with terrorism charges for planning to create an anti-government militia. This is serious. And it's happening in the context of a much broader concerning trend of offline anti-government extremist organizing. And I did some digging, talked to some experts, and learned some stuff that goes beyond the press release from the RCMP, including finding these guys' Facebook pages. So let's dive in. First, let's talk about what actually happened. 4 men were just charged in Quebec after allegedly, quote, intending to forcibly take possession of land in the Quebec City area. 3 men in their mid-20s, Marc-Aurèle Chabot, Simon Onguerzodet, and Raphaël Lagacé, are accused of planning to create an anti-government militia, according to the RCMP press release. Quote, to achieve this, they took part in military-style training as well as shooting, ambush, survival, and navigation exercises. They also conducted a scouting operation. The RCMP included a photo of a military-style training in which the accused took part. It goes on to say that, quote, a variety of firearms, some prohibited, as well as high-capacity magazines and tactical equipment were allegedly used in these activities. A 4th individual in his 30s, Matthew Forbes, is facing charges largely related to firearms, prohibited devices, and explosives. The release rounds off by telling us that, quote, searches conducted in January 2024 in the Quebec City area led to the seizure of 16 explosive devices, 83 firearms and accessories, approximately 11,000 rounds of ammunition of various calibers, nearly 130 magazines, 4 pairs of night vision goggles, and military equipment. I don't know if I can show all this, so I'm kind of blocking it with my head, but wow. Now, one thing I found interesting about this release was it acknowledged ideologically motivated violent extremism, but it didn't discuss what kind of ideologically motivated violence extremism it was, beyond that it was anti-government. So I did a little digging and I found these guys' Facebook pages. Now, most of them were pretty locked down, but Raphaël Lagacé's was wide open, which seems like a really smart choice when you are allegedly launching a militia. But anyway, looking at his profile, you get a sense of what brand of radicalization he was subscribing to. He had a few posts about COVID and about guns and opposing gun laws. And he did share one post from Pierre Poilievre's Facebook page that was about COVID. But where things got really revealing was in his likes. He liked stuff like exposing feminism 2.0 and Rabbi Donald Trump, which is a page full of right-wing conspiracies. In fact, he likes several pages that are sharing far-right anti-establishment conspiracy theories. I shared my findings with Evan Belgord from the Canadian Anti-Hate Network, which is one of the top nonprofits exposing hate and extremism in the country. He told me that what I found on Raphaël Lagacé's Facebook are, quote, hallmarks that this individual held either right-wing or far-right ideology. And that's not a huge surprise to me, because I've been reporting on far-right extremism in Canada for a while now and have been paying particular attention to the offline organizing that has started happening, especially active clubs. Take, for example, Diagolon, which has created its own group that trains in the woods and seems to only accept Canadian men of European descent, whose, quote, birthright, they claim, has been stolen and who they say are being pushed out of society and replaced by, quote, foreigners. And Diagolon, according to a new report from the Canadian Anti-Hate Network, is one of the largest and most active white nationalist networks in Canada. And their members have hung out with other members of Canadian active clubs. Because as small and pathetic as they are, unfortunately, there is not only one. This is a serious and growing problem. When I asked Evan about these recent arrests, he told me that, quote, the most common form of extremism in Canada is probably anti-government, anti-authority, which isn't a very descriptive term and doesn't say anything about ideology. But he said, quote, these movements, like the convoy and separatist movements, also tend to hold far-right beliefs. We have seen a massive rise in conspiracy theory beliefs and violent rhetoric coming from far-right anti-government spaces. Mis and disinformation during the pandemic drew people into those spaces and introduced them to a variety of conspiracy theories, some that create panic and anger that leads to violent rhetoric and actions. Now, on top of chatting with Evan about this, I also reached out to Amarnath Amarasingam, one of the top extremism researchers in Canada, and I asked him about these latest arrests and how they fit into into the broader extremism picture in Canada. He told me that he has done some work with former members of the far right who were also part of the military. Because in case you missed it when I mentioned it off the top, these arrests included active members of the Canadian Armed Forces. And for Amar, this has made several things clear. He said that right-wing extremist groups often encourage enlistment specifically for preparing for future violent actions or so-called revolutionary goals. By the way, in case you're wondering what this screenshot is, yeah, one of the accused allegedly created and administered an Instagram account with the aim of recruiting new members to the anti-government militia, and this is a screenshot of that. Anyway, Amar went on to say that these reported activities in Quebec, military-style training, survival exercises, use of prohibited firearms, and paramilitary planning fit precisely into the operational dimension of this nexus, which involves extremists using their military experience to increase organizational lethality and legitimacy. Now, here's the really scary part that Amar highlighted. Quote, "The fact that multiple active duty members were involved also validates one of my ongoing concerns, which is that radicalization does not only occur after discharge, but often during service, and that some members remain undetected, so-called ghost skins, until advanced planning stages. So either they were radicalized before joining the military and saw it as a way to get better trained for the coming battle, or were radicalized while there. Either way, none of it is good news." Amar added that the armed forces have tried to root out extremism within their ranks, but it's a, quote, uphill battle. There's a need for better detection, consistent punishment, and more robust post-service mechanisms. Quote, "A lot of us have warned that inadequate institutional responses and unplanned exits can increase risk for extremist violence, and that even a few such individuals can pose disproportionate threats to national security and institutional legitimacy. I think the sheer size of the weapons cache uncovered here speaks to that." Once again, I don't think I can show this, but he's not kidding. So folks, don't look down south and feel relieved that we don't have those same issues here, because Canada has a real and growing far-right extremism issue, and we can only ignore that at our own peril. What do you think of all this?